So, Ethan, man, I'm a man who is kind of formal, kind of not. So, I do got to say, though, in the beginning, is welcome to the show, man. Welcome to Dino Times.
Oh, happy to be here.
Thanks, man. It's honestly, it's an honor to have you on here. It's like we talk a lot on on Facebook Messenger and shit too, but it's really kind of cool to have you here because I mean, how did we technically meet? Was it from when I messaged you about the comic book back in the day? Like, seems like a year or two now.
Yeah, maybe. I remember it had to do with Comic Chronicle, and I don't know if I reached out to you or vice versa. I know I do a lot of the social networking, messaging, and reaching out to new people, but sometimes new people come to me.
I think it might have
So
been me going to you, if I remember correctly. And then it was after that that I had Babasu on the, I believe pronounces, I hope to God I'm saying his name right. um, is I had him on the podcast, on the Comic Chronicle podcast, and we were talking about it. And then we were, then it was, we wanted to have you on, which we still got to have you on that show, by the way, to help promote the comic whenever it does come out.
oh yeah, absolutely.
Which, man, I gotta say, is the fan base, by the way, too, is for Primitive War. I guess we should make that clear now. Is Ethan, you wrote Primitive War. I guess we should make it like, what? Who the hell is this Ethan dude? You wrote Primitive War, man, which is why I have you on the show today. Because honestly, like, it's a staple, I think, in paleo community at this point because the fandom's so large. It's so large. And you had your first negative review the other day. I saw you put it in there, which happens. Like, there's barely any negative reviews. I'm like, my God, how does he do it? But I think Primitive War has now been like a staple a little bit in paleo community, especially with novels and the novelizations and stuff.
You know, it's funny. One of the artists was actually mentioning something like that to me yesterday about how the series kind of stands on its own at this point, and it's a known quantity, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I don't know. As far as it's grown, I always see it the same way that I saw it when I came up with it as a kid. You know, back in high
Mm.
school, where I'm just thinking it'd be nice if I could write stories about dinosaurs and maybe work with some artists to help bring those dinosaurs to life online. And I know that Primitive War has been purchased and read in countries all over the planet. I mean, as far as the Middle East and Kuwait, I was going to shout out a reader I know from there that paid for an autograph copy, but I don't remember how to pronounce his name. I think it's uh, Fawan or Faran.
I think they'll understand.
Yeah,
I think, yeah. Like,
yeah,
I think they should understand. I mean, let's be honest here. As Americans, we're sometimes it's very tough to pronounce certain languages and names. It just
yeah,
happens.
yeah. I mean, either way, the series has been purchased all over the world, all over Europe and South America. It's been read and reviewed in Brazil and France. It's got followings in India and Australia and parts of Southeast Asia where I'm not even sure how the people are reading the book because it's only available in English and no translations are available, but it's still being read all over. And it kind of blows my mind. But at the same time, the paleo community is kind of so small and niche that it's hard not to, uh, throw a rock and make waves.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, yeah, I don't want to say 100% yes to that, but then a part of me is like, yeah, it's true because um, paleo community is small. It's big. It's big, but we say small, but it's small compared to like the Marvel fandom and shit like that. Like it's small compared to like a lot of like comic book community and stuff. And people are gonna kill me for saying that shit, but I hate to say, but it is kind of truly. Everybody knows each other in paleo, like especially if you're on the Facebook groups and different groups and whatnot. You tend to see people maybe recognize or see people post shit and whatnot. I mean, I post on there a lot because I'm on the YouTube channel and what, but not. But when you make the waves, it's just a domino effect. It's 100% a domino effect, and that's a nice part about it too is you're really doing. And honestly, though, I do want to tell you this. I wanted to wait to the recording to tell you this. Is as a fan of Michael Crichton, and obviously because most of the books dedicated to him, if not all, what has it been like with that? And has anybody ever said that you're the new Michael Crichton?
I get that most frequently in reviews. It's
Really?
usually usually the 4 and 5 star reviews, I'd say like 70% of them will drop that reference. But
Mm,
the thing is that with Michael Crichton, I'm just trying to carry a torch that he lit in the 90s with the Jurassic Park and the Lost World novels
mm,
that I feel like nobody has really carried since then. So for me, it was more just carrying that tradition of bringing dinosaur stories to a modern audience with deeper meanings and messages than just people getting eaten.
yeah.
And as far as actually being comparable to Michael Crichton, I don't think I'm anywhere near as well researched as he is, I would say, because you know that for every page that he's written in his novels, there's probably tens of other pages that went to just researching that specific subject.
Mm,
The example I always think of is Congo. How like Congo, the first 150 pages are predominantly just about the usefulness of a diamond for computer circuitry, and all of that 100 pages of just the most meandering talk about the science of circuit boards and all that to build
yeah.
up to a story where you have albino gorillas killing people with stone paddles. That's what I take from Crichton is being able to ground people in a believable reality so that you can tell these fantastical stories. In my mind, Primitive War has never been science fiction, it's always been science fantasy. The most science that actually gets used in Primitive War is just to allow for this reality to exist. Everything of that science is basically just pure fantasy and fiction. Like we know that a particle collider, a particle accelerator couldn't create a rift in time and space large enough
Yeah.
for animals to come through, and it couldn't really create a black hole. But for the layman, it's just a way to get into this fictitious world. And I definitely have to give props to Michael Crichton for doing it better than anybody else has ever done in
Well, the
history.
man was pretty much a scientist. Let's be honest here. He was a very, very smart man, and he was
Harvard
leagues above his
graduate.
own. Yeah, fuck yeah. I mean, I don't know about you. You and I put together, we're pretty fucking smart. But compared to him, I don't know. Even with both of us combined, yeah, that would be rough. Because, well, you mentioned with the fantasy though, is yes with the particle collider and stuff like that. Yes, there's a little bit of fantasy in there. But once you get to like the dinosaurs and the nature and stuff, that's one thing I fell in love with, man, is the way you were able to incorporate real world with dinosaurs. And I've put it in the reviews, and I know you probably heard me say it before, but the way that you make prehistoric creatures, let's just put it that, because it's not all dinosaurs, prehistoric creatures, you put them into our world, and the after effects that would happen in nature. You know, as a nature guy myself, who works with exotic animals and have seen what happens, like shit, Pablo Escobar's hippos, what they're doing to the environment and stuff. A perfect
Hmm.
example. You know what's
Yeah.
going on with that? Like Florida, like what happens when you put megafauna in an environment like this? And like, well, the line in there was like, hey, I believe in the first one. I don't remember who said it, but I remember hearing it was and reading it. Like, hey, notice how there's no tigers and or all that jazz around. Like everyone's been outcompeted. I think like the only animals you mentioned that were still really around in the valley was really just monkeys and birds. It's like and
Yeah.
every like the elephants are dead or they're gone. The predators been outcompeted and shit. That makes sense. That's very It's fantasy, but it's logical. Like you can understand and be like, okay, I can actually believe that. So it's fantasy, but almost believable fantasy in a sense.
Yeah. And the thing with some of these species, and this is something that the main uh, scientist in the series, Andre Wynn, discusses, is that a lot of these species that they see in the valley in the first novel, as well as in Angola in the second novel, is that a lot of these species were on Earth for tens of millions of years.
Yeah.
And in that time, they could have adapted and changed in all these ways that we would never see in the fossil record. Because, I mean, if you look at the skeletons of uh, say a cardinal and a blue jay, it's going to be really hard to pick out the uh, nuances that differentiate those species, especially if you were to look at a cardinal and a blue jay in, modern times life right now.
Yeah.
They clearly are two different animals entirely, but to us, if we only had their skeletons to work off of, it'd be incredibly difficult to find those nuances that differentiate them.
Yeah, I mean,
That,
shit, you can use the example of frogs. Like, I mean, kind of pun intended with Michael Crichton there, but use the example of frogs. Of like, you look at it, you have frogs lined up, right? Or maybe it's like decomposing bodies or something like that, or skeleton, and you're taking a look and you're like, oh yeah, look at these frogs. Like, you would have never have guessed one of them out of the three are poisoned. It's a poison dart frog. Like, you wouldn't know, you wouldn't understand, like, get that from that. So that's you're absolutely right. Like, there's things in there that we just don't know. Maybe later on discover actually the attributes of the animals, I guess you could say.
yeah, and that's what I think I tried the most with the ancient animals that appear in the series, is trying to bring them a new kind of life that they may not have experienced in the realm of fiction before.
Like a barbed ton on a Quetzalcoatlus, which is
Yeah,
metal. That's metal beyond belief right there.
yeah.
Oh my
So
god.
I always give credit for the Quetzalcoatlus tongue to this artist from Europe named Attila Kovacs.
Oh,
I may have mispronounced that last name. He's uh, not a super well known paleo artist, but he makes great paleo themed memes. And he actually illustrated a Quetzalcoatlus with a different looking tongue. The tongue that he illustrated was more like a brush almost, but the imagery of that brush like tongue uh, inspired me to go with the hooked barb tongue of the Quetzalcoatlus.
I
So
like it.
every time I get the chance, I always give him a shout out for that,
Oh god, of
because
course.
yeah, I asked him if I could reinterpret that in a way that made more sense to me, and he was totally cool with it.
I like it, man. I love it. And I do have to give credit where credit's due. Is, man, I've never put it on record, but you know how I love Xavier, right? You and I have talked about it off like in messages, and I love Xavier. But my second favorite character is actually Andre. And you guys, you haven't made him in an artwork piece yet. And I'm like, I want to see Andre, man. He's gonna be look like shit in first Primitive War, but I love, especially in the second one, I love Andre. I really, in Dispatches too, I love Andre. I don't know why. Like, maybe because I see myself as Andre. Like, you dumbasses, you think you can go after that thing? You're an idiot. Like just run. Like, I don't know why I love him to death.
Yeah, what's funny is that he actually wasn't originally going to be in the first novel. They were going to find his body in the research station and find his
Oh,
journal, and then they were going to kind of piece together what happened in the valley from his journal. But honestly, that wasn't enough for me. Then I had the idea of maybe, well, there's a scientist that works with the Americans that's already on their base, and I wrote that in. And then I did away with that entirely to go with the mad Russian scientist living alone for over a year,
morphine addict.
slipping heavily into that addiction.
Oh my god. And it's one of those where you're like, oh, he's a morphine addict, and most people would be like, well, why? And like, oh, he's so bad, like, there's no way I want to do the morphine. And then there's the realist people who are like, yeah, you know what? That actually does make sense. It makes sense
I
of
mean,
why you decided to turn to that in a bunker in fucking Vietnam Valley filled with carnivores.
yeah, I mean, you got a year and nothing to do, but
Your friends are all dead. It's like you got a
yeah,
little bit of herbivores. You're trying to study dinosaurs and live. Oh
yeah.
man.
Entree is kind of the secret heart of the entire series.
That's true. That is very, especially in Dispatches and in Primitive War 2. I really love that. I really love him in those ones. I really do. Primitive War 2 though, all I gotta say is I love you to death, Ethan. You know this, right? You're a chill dude. We agree a lot. Fuck you for what happened to Xavier in Primitive War 2. I love you to death, man, but my God. Damn it.
Yeah,
Oh.
scalps somersaulting out of teeth.
Oh my god! And I was like, no! And, like, I remember I was reading because oftentimes when I'm reading any of your books, I turn on, I put it in the group, the discussion on Facebook, and it was like this Jurassic Park esque, like it's dinosaurs, rainforest, sort of. The wallpaper is beautiful, like little ambiance. YouTube, I always turn it on, have it
Mm.
on, have some glass of milk or something like that with me, maybe a bowl of grapes. Weird combo, I know. Besides the point. And I'm going in and I'm reading that, and it's late at night after work at the animal hospital, and I close up. I finish that scene. I then get to the next chapter, and I usually call my girlfriend at the end of the night. She's like, "Hey, how you doing?" I'm like, "Babe, I am so messed up right now." And she's like, "Why?" Like, I can't spoil this because I know you're gonna start reading these soon. But all I gotta say is my boy is dead, and I am not happy with it, and I am shook.
I've actually gotten so many messages regarding that scene. If you want,
Yeah.
we can spoil it
Mm,
fully.
I'd say we wait on that just in case, because I don't want to get like, "Why'd you spoil?" We'll save spoilers for later, I think.
Yeah, that's fine. But I've gotten a lot of messages regarding that specific scene, and I always try to explain my reasoning behind anything in the series if people ask. If it gets into like nitpicking where it's like, well, why is the Utah Raptor being acknowledged in the 70s when they weren't discovered until the 90s? Then
Oh,
my only response is, well, dinosaurs also never appeared during the Vietnam War. So checkmate, the entire story is based on fantasy. That's why I say
yeah,
science fantasy rather than science fiction. Because
yeah.
science is only like an anchor to kind of keep you believing that this world can exist, even if it's totally beyond our understanding and means now. But
An even better reaction to that, though, Ethan. Don't mean to cut you off, but an even better one to say to that, those people is, "Did you like the Utah Raptor?" Well, yeah. So shut up.
hmm,
So, I like then shut your face. Then you're fine. Like, ugh.
eh, I mean, it's another thing with the paleo community being such a small niche is that there's a lot of paleo artists, and I'm not going to name names, that believe that the most virtuous thing that you can do is completely deny all creativity beyond immediately representing what an animal is understood to be. And if you try to even go so much as like a little outside of the line of that design, then it immediately gets thrown into the speculative evolution pile
Yeah.
and treated as just pure nonsense. I
Did
mean,
you see? Sorry, this goes on tangent with it. Did you see Prehistoric Kingdom though? What they're doing?
I actually haven't.
They're doing something. You might appreciate this because I mean, it's kind of messing with people with that sense because of messing with paleo artists because you can do. It's the game where it's like kind of like Jurassic Park or Jurassic World Evolution, but it's more scientifically accurate. So it's cool. Is you can do different skins and the different genus and whatnot of different dinosaurs, but they released. They're like, yeah, you get to mess around and be kind of fantasy a little bit with it because they have a woolly Pachyrhinosaurus.
Hmm.
It's kind of cool.
Well,
I give it a
yeah,
Google. You might enjoy that.
I mean, I remember the Spinosaurus with the trunk and flippers and
Oh god.
uh, full seal body. I mean, I'm honestly open to any interpretation of any dinosaur. I don't
Mhm.
have any problem with it. Um, I mean, I've even had people illustrate dinosaurs based on my books where they're not feathered at all. They're scaly still,
Mm.
and I still like it. I mean, I grew up on Jurassic Park dinosaurs. I grew up with Charles R. Knight illustrations.
Mm.
Uh, that is never going to go out of style. I mean, it may go out of style and vogue in the paleo community, but as far as just me being a lifelong lover of dinosaurs, I'll always be open to any interpretation.
Yeah, of course. It's keeping that open mind that you have to do. I mean, in it's people who really I don't want to say this because I don't want to get hated upon massively for it, but I think in when you're in the paleo community, all I'm gonna say is you have to keep an open mind because if you don't, I mean, when there's new evidence to prove something's changed, you got to roll with it. Like, well, I like this interpretation. Well, it's like, okay, well, we have to evolve, and a whole paleo community is based on the study of evolution, the study of evolution of the dinosaurs and how they changed and whatnot too. You got to evolve too. I'm sorry, like if some of them had feathers, some of them had feathers. They're like, no, 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 the Spinosaurus is a change. Like, I like the one where it's two-legged and long, like the JP3 kind of version. I like that one, but it changed into something different, and I'm still okay with it. Like, I still love Spinosaurus. I no matter what the designs would be on it, I still love it. Speaking of that, also
Yeah,
speaking of it, that artwork was gorgeous. You released the other day, by the way.
yeah, the Oxalea Spinosaurus by Ane scene.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's the newest member of our creative team, and that Spinosaurus design was a complete contribution by him. So the way that it works, with Primitive War 1, I already knew what I wanted every species of animal to look like, and I was working with artists before I published the book so that we could have like a kind of canon appearance. But as the books have gone along and I have more artists collaborating with me on species designs before I even release the books, I've actually given some of them free reign to just submit their own designs so that they
nice.
can be implemented. So
Yeah,
that Spinosaurus oxalea, um, I always call it by both names because I can't just call it one or the other because taxonomy, you know.
yeah.
But
Oh man,
I mean that waddling semi-aquatic Spinosaurus, I still love that just as much as the ridiculous mega monster from Jurassic Park 3. In fact, I almost like the original inaccurate Spinosaurus more than the modern interpretation, which, I mean, how can you get mad at me for feeling that way? I mean, I'm still trying to go with a more accurate depiction of Spinosaurus, but I'm not going to be, following along with the uh, the most recent findings on Spinosaurus up until the book comes out, just in case they make a last minute change. When
yeah,
I wrote the first novel, the T Rex from the very beginning was going to be feathered because that was where the science was starting to point because they had found Eutyrannus and everybody was saying, well, that means probably all theropods were feathered or all tyrannosaurids were feathered. And I was like, well, I guess I can make a cool feathered T Rex. And I wasn't totally the biggest fan of feathered dinosaurs at that point, but I was like, well, if I want to try to keep up with Michael Crichton, I should probably try to do the most accurate I can.
yeah.
And, just like he had the Dilophosaurus with spitting venom, I decided to include Quetzalcoatlus with a barbed tongue and camouflaging Utahraptors. But as far as the design goes, as soon as the book came out, I stuck with it. And when I was working on the book, I stuck with it because in my head, I was like, it's going to be a feathered T Rex no matter what.
Yeah.
And right around when the book came out, there's an artist that released what was supposed to be the most accurate T Rex depicted ever. And it was basically like Barney the dinosaur,
I
just
remember that.
yeah, leathery skin,
Yeah,
lips, big, waddling giant, and yeah, it's a beautiful specimen and it's a beautiful interpretation. But I wasn't about to go and unpublish a book and then rewrite it just to fit what understanding changed, and that's something that I've kind of stuck by. I mean, I know that a lot of my species will end up being called inaccurate in the future, maybe. I mean, for all we know, in 20 years, they could say, well, Utahraptor didn't have any feathers at all. It actually had skin just like people. and
it's true.
and
I
I
mean,
would
yeah,
I would just say, okay, well, when I wrote the book, this is what they were, and that's how they're always going to be. I mean, with
yeah.
Jurassic Park, you have people saying, well, why aren't they making feathered dinosaurs now? Why aren't they going to make feathered dinosaurs for the next one? And I've heard maybe they will throw them into the next Jurassic World movie, but like, what are they supposed to do? Remake the first three movies and then make Velociraptor into a knee-high little ankle biter?
Yeah, I know.
I
That's
mean,
the thing.
sure.
Like, it's like I don't know why it's a difficult concept for people to understand when things are being made, and it goes back to that kind of like evolution of what's going on thing that we were talking about is things may like it takes a while to write a hell, it takes a while to write a book. It takes a while to make a movie, and advancements can be made in the scientific community that change it, and they can't go back and change everything. It's just how it works. It's things based at the time. Like, what was it? It's the same. It's the same talk of you have somebody who's now like you got a kid these days, like a teenager, and they're like, "Oh my god, people with VHS, they were so stupid. They should have just made DVDs and stuff like that. Like we didn't have the technology at the time. Like, what do you want from us here? Like, we can't go back. What do you want us to go back and just do all that? No, it doesn't work like that. And it's weird.
Yeah,
It's a weird thing, man. It's a very weird thing. That's why I don't know. I wish people would understand that a little bit more, but one day I think we'll get there. I think we'll get there at a certain point, and everybody wants that version that they love, right? They want we want the most scientific accurate version, or we want this version because this is my favorite version. But teach their own, I guess. I don't know. It's a weird thing. It's a weird subject, and it's kind of like you can
yeah,
hate people, but
it's
I
something
don't
that
know.
I'm not sure how many other fandoms have to deal with. I mean, I don't think
Um,
anybody's. I mean, is anybody like fighting over the realism of Mandalorian lore? Or
yes,
yeah,
yes.
probably a bad example. I don't
Like, yes,
really
there is.
I don't really watch television anymore. I can't even think of what the last thing I've watched all the way through was. Maybe Walking with Dinosaurs a month ago.
People do the same shit with comic books. I mean, you got the select few of people that are just in every fandom, man. Like that's the thing about it. Like paleo, we're gonna have it seems like a little bit more, but it's in every community. Uh,
Yeah.
a little bit better note is I have to ask you this. I don't know if you've ever put this on record or not, man, but it's a question like I ever since I wanted to ask you, but I was like, I'll save it for when we're eventually talking the show. Have you? You can tell us if you don't want to spoil it or not. Have you written your favorite dinosaur yet?
Oh yeah, Utah Raptor.
Oh, fuck. I did. I
Yeah,
was like, it might be. I don't know, but I like because I know the love of the Utah Raptors. Like, I don't know. Maybe he thinks they're just really good or they're his favorite, but really, Utah Raptor.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's basically a velociraptor the size of a grizzly bear. I mean, you can't get much better than that.
That's true. That's a valid point. That's a very valid point. And you write them good too. That actually makes a lot more sense because you write them really good.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think that I make the Utah Raptors have plot armor or I make them into these unstoppable killing machines, but at the same time, they seem to forget how many of them also get grievously scarred and injured and killed
Hmm.
by human
You
characters.
Tyrannus or that too.
Yeah,
That too. That whole chapter was one that I was like, holy crap. There was no dialogue really spoken at all in that whole dispatches chapter. And in case people don't know, it's U Tyrannus v Utah Raptor.
yeah, and it did not go
And
well for the Utah Raptors at all. They all all went down very swiftly.
you want to hate Utah Raptors because you're like, just die. Like, and they take, you're like, my God, like they're the villains basically. And but you are like, you want to hate them, but you love them. And then when that happens, you're like, oh my God, I want to have a lot of sympathy for you guys, but then not really. Because you kill a lot of people we love, like a la Cyclops, like you kill a bunch of people, and everyone else, like all the other.
Yeah, but then who do you think's going to be on a T-shirt after somebody reads that book?
That's very fair. That's very valid. That's a very valid point indeed. Oh my God. That's speaking of which too is I gotta get that T-shirt one day. I gotta get a Primitive War T-shirt because I think that would. I still gotta get one. I gotta rep. I gotta rep. If then again, I'm still paying Bob. I gotta pay him next week. I gotta say, I kind of spoil it. Is I don't know. Have you seen the artwork that Babasu's doing right now for the piece that I commissioned?
Oh yeah,
Oh, you seen it?
yeah, yeah,
Okay. I was wondering because I'm like, I don't know if he even has it.
yeah.
Listen. Oh,
He's working on four simultaneously while also illustrating the first. He's inking the first issue of the first volume, and four commissions that, and also the work that he regularly does for Xenoscope. He is one of the hardest workers I know, just in life.
He's like the artist version of you, though, because you're writing. I think, aren't you writing Dispatches too? And then you're also writing Primitive War 3 right now.
Yeah, so here's the thing with Dispatches 2. It was originally going to be called The Plague of Sheepatotek, which is
Oh,
the Alpha Utah Raptor scene in the second novel. And it was going to have more of a focus on the effects of the Dromaeosaur mutagen plague, DM10. But because of everything that's happened over the past year and a half,
yeah.
I actually was intending to publish that book around January of 2020
Oh,
or December of 2019, but I've pretty much gutted that entire book and I'm kind of rebuilding it from scratch because I don't want to be telling a book or I don't want to be telling a story about, widespread pandemic killing scores of people because of that's kind of what we've been hearing about for the past,
yeah,
year.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. That was
so
smart
I'm
move there, man.
Yeah, so I'm renaming it the Odyssey of Sheepatotek, and I'm putting more of a focus on other elements. I mean, the DM10 is still going to be there, but it's not like we're going to be going through the Andromeda strain with dinosaurs or anything. I don't think anybody really wants intense uh, virology. I
You know
mean,
what? Before COVID, we'd all say yes because
oh yeah.
I mean, if you're listening to the show slash watching, or if like you read the books, and I mean, I believe it's what, the DX virus? No, it's not the DX virus. It's in Lost World, is it?
Well, yeah, in the Lost World you had DX, which I think was like a prion that they got from sheep.
Yeah, yeah. So, and we love that. Like, we love that. And I think like dinosaurs and diseases is a cool concept. Like pre-COVID, we would have loved to fucking read that. That would have been awesome. But
Yeah. But
you're
now
right. Yeah.
but now reading people being interviewed in hospital beds while they're talking about this
Yeah.
horrific disease they got while in the jungle, it's not going to be nearly as fun as it would have been, back then.
Oh
But
no, it'd make you so sad. It would be. Yeah, it'd be rough. But I
yeah.
mean, you know what? That's good though. That's good that you acknowledge that shit because I was on Xbox earlier and I was in the store and I was because gaming has been my escape. A lot of writing is too. I tend to have a lot of escapes these days. But one of the things is I saw in there was a pandemic game, and they're like, "Oh, it's on sale. Come buy the pandemic game." And I'm like, "I'm good. I am. You may be making money because it's on sale, and people will buy it because it's on sale. I refuse. I'm good. I've lived it. I'm fine. I'm living it. No. But it's good though. I mean, can you give any hints on what it might be? I mean, on record, if you want.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So here's the thing. So Sheepatotek, the Alpha Utah Raptor in Primitive War 2,
Was an asshole.
yeah, absolutely. But he managed to make it all the way from Vietnam to Angola, which is a daunting and extreme journey for any person to comprehend, let alone for an animal to comprehend. So the entire anthology, since it's episodic short stories, it's going to be broken up between years. So it'll be 1970 to 1971, 71 to 72, 72 to 73, 73 to 74. And each year will track Stalker Force as they essentially follow Sheepatotek as he's following the trail of Utah raptors that escaped the valley years before he did.
Mm,
So all those species that Stalker Force discusses in the second novel, Negredo, Albedo, Centrinitas, and Rubedo,
yeah.
those are all Utah raptors that got out of the valley when the original collider imploded.
Jesus.
So I probably shouldn't have revealed that much because it's kind of a huge spoiler, but basically,
I mean, and I would say no. I don't know, because that's kind of like hyping it up. I think.
yeah, basically, what Stalker Force comes to find out is the Utah Raptors had a 2-year head start when they left the valley to begin with. And so, as Stalker Force is trying to clean up the mess being left behind by Sheepatotek and the Utah Raptors that he encounters along the route of his journey, their stalker force is going to find out just how adaptable the Utah Raptors are and how utterly fucked they are. Sorry for my French, but
I mean, I've already cussed a couple times already on this episode. You're good.
but I mean that's just it. They're still DM10, and that's how they predominantly follow Shipa Totec, is by following the outbreaks, the CDC tracks across the Earth as he's migrating. But the other thing too is that during that span of years, 1968 to 1974, almost every country between Vietnam and Angola was going through times of intense conflict and civil war and Cold War conflict. I mean, most people, when they think of the Cold War, they think of Vietnam or they think of Cuba, and that's about it. I mean, now they might think Angola because of the second novel, but
Yeah.
with Primitive War Dispatches 2, I want to kind of show how this domino effect of countries falling in on themselves and fighting themselves and each other basically allows for this dangerous species of animal to flourish and spread wide and far.
Mm.
And it's like no matter how much Stalker Force is trying to correct the issue at hand, the dinosaurs breeding, uh, it's like how much can you do when the dinosaurs are in East Bengal, Bangladesh, you know, Operation Searchlight, and all of the conflicts that happen in India between Pakistan? It's like, how do you get dinosaurs hunted down when that's going down? How do you?
Yeah, it's like it's a little bit of a complicated process, and it's not like you're tracking down a Rex where it's a large theropod. It's a dromaeosaur. It's like a Utah raptor, which kind of, I'm gonna say quote unquote small, but it's still something that could easily hide.
Yeah, and there's a lot of wild terrain. And another thing too is that most of like I'm 26 years old now. I was 22 when I published Primitive War 1. And most of my life I've had smartphone technology accessible, Google Maps accessible, but people underestimate how different the world was 40, 50 years ago.
Oh yeah.
I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
the infrastructure that existed in the 60s and 70s was nowhere near what it is now. And communication wasn't something that you had in your pocket any second of any day. I mean, theoretically, these animals could just travel hundreds of miles without anybody seeing it because there's nothing in the 200-mile span, or there may be like a handful of villages or townships, but they don't have the means to access, higher forms of government authority.
I mean, that's true. That's honestly very true. I mean, you're not. It's. I'm sitting here thinking about it now. It's very, very much so, especially in those countries too. I mean, it wasn't like.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's nuts. Like there was a lot of. I mean, pun intended. Not primitive, but it's more basic than I think people will ever realize. I mean, shit, there's still villages to this day, but there's a lot more villages in a lot of different places in Europe and stuff like that. Still, I mean, it's only a little bit after World War II, you still had villages instead of towns and all sorts of jazz like that.
yeah. The unfortunate news for people is that Primitive War Dispatches Volume 2, The Odyssey of Shipa Totec, will most likely not be out until later on this year because I try not to rush anything too much. Uh, I mean, Primitive War 3 alone will likely not be out for 3 or 4 years
Oh, wow.
because, I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. When Primitive War 1 came out, I was like, all right, 3 or 4 years, Primitive War 2 will come out. I can I can put out the bestiaries as quickly as me and Bruno work on them, and I can put out the dispatches books relatively quickly, but with novels, one of my favorite quotes is writing isn't writing, it's rewriting.
Mm.
It may take me 2 months to write the first 400-page draft, but that next 2.5, 3, maybe 4 years will just be spent going over it over and over and over again, revising, editing, rewriting.
And
And
it's not like you're not putting out content though. I mean, you have plenty out there. I mean, I'm not going to say anything because we stuff we talked about on Facebook, but like there's stuff like you got the comic book, you have that. You just released the audiobook that just went to Audible. There's still content right now. Also, my girlfriend's been listening to the audiobook version when she's in the car with me, so that's been fun. She's been enjoying it, and we've. I think that's the thing is like maybe people I want to clarify too for people who are like, oh my god, we're not gonna get 3 for that long. Like, you're right. It takes a while to write a book, but also you guys are putting out so much stuff every other month. It seems like there's plenty of things that tide us over till then.
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, trying to get the Dispatches audiobook out this year, and trying really hard to find somebody that can narrate the second audiobook that is actually from Africa, since the two protagonists, Joseph and Zosimus, they're both, from Angola.
Yeah,
And,
so you want to have a good you don't want to have the white African accent, say the least.
well, I mean, even a white African would be fine, just somebody that's actually from Africa that can believably do these
Yeah,
accents.
I kind of I was trying to figure out what the Spanglish version would be of that, but yeah.
Pigeon?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's true. I mean, it is that is also the thing I guess you have to worry about with that is trying to get it. I mean, Wayne June, by the way, I got to put it on record. Phenomenal for the first volume so far. Or not the first volume, the first book. Wayne June doing that, phenomenal. I listened to the whole audiobook already myself, and phenomenal, man.
Yeah, I'm really happy with the way it turned out. I know a few people have had some tears jerked out of them listening to his reading, especially
Yeah.
Legion.
Oh God, why? You know that's the one that messes people up. You know it. And that messed me up. I was sitting there at the animal hospital listening to it. And I was like, oh my God, people are gonna think I'm having like I'm crying over this dog or cat or anything like that, or I got bit again by something. Like, no, I'm just listening to the audiobook, man. It's tough. It's a the girlfriend asked me the same thing, Michaela. Did she's like, wow. She's like, oh, is it the same? Like you're listening to it now? Like, no, it's totally different. It's really you could read the book numerous times, but as soon as you start hearing it, it's knee jerking all over again.
Oh yeah, I love it. It brings a whole new life to it,
Yeah,
and to know that the words of a 22-year-old are coming out of a 70-plus-year-old man, it's kind of a
yeah,
trip
true.
for me. It's like, so that's what my inner monologue is. It's a 70-year-old man.
Listen here, if you read the Primitive War and you're like, oh, I never met Ethan, but I read his Primitive War book, and you've got to be thinking Ethan's a very mature motherfucker. He's pretty mature to say the least, because I agree. That's one thing I got to put out too is I was like I read it first. I read all the ones out right now, and everything like that. I'm a massive fan. I'm like, man, Ethan and I are in the same headspace on a lot of stuff. I really are. Like the way we are maturity level, like the dark kind of things, and the way we think a little bit about stuff, like actually kills and whatnot, along the jazz of like dinosaurs and jazz. Like, oh yeah, very very much so. I was like, wow, this is very cool. Man, all I gotta say is though, you right. You make Kafrosukis like a monster. Oh my lord! Speaking of Legion, man. What is there like a list of them? I mean, you put Goliath in there. Goliath was also really cool. I love Goliath.
Yeah, it's funny because one of our artists, the newest one, Ane Singh, he was working on a meme, the Chad Father T-Rex versus the Virgin Goliath.
Oh, that's
Because they're
pretty
like,
good.
because they're like the Goliath loses a lot of fights, doesn't he? And it's like, yeah, but he won the one that mattered.
It's very true. You know what? Man, I don't. Has anybody ever made the fan art yet? I don't think so. Has there been a Goliath versus Father T-Rex?
So somebody actually requested that,
Oh, wow.
and I mentioned it to Bruno, the artist of the Bestiaries. If you look him up on social media, his name's Christopherson Hernandez, but for publishing, he goes by Bruno Hernandez.
Hmm.
And he was the first artist to illustrate the Goliath, so he feels a kind of fatherly kinship with that big beast. And so I think that might be one of his next projects, though right now he's doing a Ankylosaurus facial profile for the second volume of the Priminivore Bestiary.
Ooh. All right.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it. Oh man. So I know. Did well, going back to Spinosaurus a little bit here because I love that dinosaur so much. Did you say which book that one was going to be in? Is that Primitive War 3 or is that Primitive War Bestiaries 2
Oh, Priminivore 3.
or Dispatches? Okay. Okay.
So the way it kind of works out is Bestiary Volume 1 is Primitive War 1 and Dispatches 1 and 2.
Okay.
Second Bestiary is Primitive War 2 and Dispatches 3. And then Bestiary 3 will be Dispatches 4 and Primitive War 3.
Very
It's
nice.
kind of a tricky system to look at canonically, but it's basically a trilogy with 2 books between the novels. So it's like Primitive War 1, Dispatches 1, Dispatches 2, Primitive War 2, Dispatches 3, Dispatches 4, Primitive War 3. But the thing is that you don't need to read any of the dispatches to read the novels. It's just something to expand upon the world that this series is.
Yeah.
That was one of the most important things to me from the beginning was I wanted to write a series in which the world can become filled with dinosaurs in a believable way, in a way that can allow for almost any story to be told. So the dispatch books are kind of like my own guideline for future fans and writers to tell stories of their own, so they can be like, oh well, I see this species appeared in this location, so since I want to write about this species, I'll tell it in this location. And you know, I think the more people read Primitive War 2, the more they'll realize just how many possibilities exist beyond that point in the story.
It's true.
Because the ending of Primitive War 2 basically flips our reality on its head.
What year again was this where reality got switched to?
1974
That's right.
is when the second novel takes place, and there's a scene in the beginning of the book where a few of the main characters meet at a bar in, I think it's pronounced the Olubutanu Tree of Life, but it's between South Africa and Angola, and it's a big tree that is hollowed out and inside is a bar, and it's been converted to all kinds of different uses. And that Tree of Life is where we first learn about the Axis Mundi Corporation. Axis Mundi is Tree of Life
And
in Gnostic terms specifically.
Oh, I didn't put that together.
And when that tree is burned down, it essentially represents how, from this point on, the Primitive War reality is no longer our reality. It's meant to represent that reality that once was the one that we inhabit is no longer there. Basically, from the moment that the first collider imploded and dinosaurs appeared, that would have been, the pinpoint moment of when that timeline diverges from our own and it ceases to be our reality.
Yeah.
But it was just a little little piece of symbolism, and that was to convey what this series is going to be going forward for people that read the second novel and Dispatches 3 and 4 and Primitive War 3. All of those books are going to be very separate from the reality that we know now and the reality
Oh,
that we know in the books preceding it.
oh yeah. You know what though? I want to put it on record, and I'm gonna let you know. As I know, one, I would probably die very fast because I would get too big for my britches and want to see shit. But I would prefer to live in primitive war reality than this reality. I'll be completely honest with you, man. It seems a lot more fun, but also a lot more dangerous. I don't know how it's possible, but I don't know. And so I told my girlfriend that I was like, and I told a friend of mine too, but because we were talking about the books, and I said, you know what, I'd love to live in a world where like dinosaurs popped up and stuff like that. And I'm like, why? And like Jurassic, like at the end of Fallen Kingdom, I was like, I would love to live in a world where dinosaurs popped up on the mainland and stuff like that. And they're like, really? No, you wouldn't. I'm like, oh, I would. Oh, I very much would because I know dinosaurs. You don't. I live. You don't. You're gonna be like, oh, it's probably what was it? We were playing Ark the other day with some friends, and all of a sudden there's a Therizinosaurus. I'm like, oh my god, we gotta go. And they're like, why? And it just I'm like, these guys are aggro, and it just attacked the living hell out of us. It killed us all. And they're like, what was that? What kind of carnivore is that? I'm like, oh yeah, little known fact, that's a herbivore, but they're kind of aggressive. And they're like, that's a herbivore. I'm like, yeah, you just don't want to mess with it. So it's like that, yeah, it's yeah, I don't know. I say that, and then I'm like, I'd probably be a Utah Raptor that would do me in.
Honestly, I would love to live in a world where dinosaurs return to the earth, but it's everything else, It's something that people talk about a lot when they review the books about how the people are more monstrous than any of the animals are. Or
I
they do more.
mentioned that before. I want to set it out there because that's very true.
Yeah, I mean, the dinosaurs kill people, but they don't torture them. They don't manipulate them. They
Yep.
don't uh they don't rape and butcher them. They just, kill them or eat them.
Probably maybe it's because of their animals. It's like maybe that's why. Like they're like maybe humanity's the like I think was maybe Primitive War 1 and 2. Well, I think I've said it on all of them because you captured it so well. I like to make sure it's on record in it when I review the books. But the dinosaurs are animals. They're not monsters. Humanity's the monsters. Like that's the like when you take a look, like Primitive War makes you realize, like, man, people suck. My God.
The Utah Raptors are definitely the clearest reflection of our own humanity in the series.
Yeah, especially when you get in the head of one of them too. Like that because you every now and then you give us the perspective of a Utah Raptor, and you're not wrong by that at all. Yeah, I can't disagree with that notion at all. Oh man, Ethan, man, we're coming near the end here a little bit, but I do have to ask you: is there been a creature yet that not Utah Raptor? Because I mean, you obviously we talk about Utah Raptors, your favorite movie, but has there been one that you've wanted to always put in, but maybe you've put in recently in anything, or is it like all the ones that you really wanted to put in, you put in the books already, or have you been saving one for later?
So I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a species list going around for Primitive War 3, and I've shared it with some people. You may have seen it. I think I may have posted it on the discussion group in Facebook, and I may have posted it in the Discord group, but pretty much all the species that I had left that I had wanted to present, I'm doing so in the third novel. I explained it kind of this way, with at least with this being literature and not like a video game or a movie or something. It's I can only use animals in certain ways as a writer, so I try to break it up into 3 categories in their relationship with the plot, whether they're pivotal, like they're integral to the plot, they have a direct role in how the story takes shape, and they are just as engaged with the narrative as the characters are. So like the Utah Raptors, Tyrannosaurus, Carcharodontosaurus, so on and so forth. Then you have consequential, which are species that are interacted with. Oh, I just saw a hawk fly by.
Cool.
Wow, that's a big bird. He's beautiful. Anyway, so you have pivotal species, then you have consequential species. So like that would be Caprasuchus, Deinonychus, Stygimoloch, Triceratops, Sinornithosaurus, Pachyrhinosaurus. Dinosaurs that engage in moments of the narrative, but the entire narrative isn't built around their interactions. And then lastly, you have inconsequential species, which may appear once or twice, or they may appear repeated times. But wow, this hawk is just watching me right now. I wish I'm gonna send you a picture.
Please do.
I'm gonna send you a picture after this. He's big bird. Holy cow!
Are you sure it's a hawk, not like a vulture of some sort?
No, that's a hawk. I see him whenever I'm boxing outside. He'll come and watch me, and I call him Sensei. And
hey, that's cool.
I've been trying to identify what kind of hawk he is, and he's just kind of bobbing his head at me, waiting for me to get to the point. Anywho,
if he attacks you, I swear to God, I'll leave that in the episode. Don't worry. Like, hey, listen to the part where I get attacked and mauled by a hawk.
God, I wish that would be so fitting.
It really would. Yeah, it would. Yeah.
So yeah, there's also in the books that third category, inconsequential species. They're more like prey animals, small animals that won't have a direct impact on the story or specific chapters, but they help to properly flesh out these ecosystems, and they fill in niches and allow for these really unique scenes where, like in Primitive War 2, you have an Ankylosaurus facing off with a rhino, and then you have Maiasaura brushing shoulders with elephants and giraffes while foraging from trees as Hypsilophodon and other critters eat around their feet. There's a lot of species in Primitive War 3, but it's going to be following those same three categories. There's going to be inconsequential species that exist to flesh out the world and the ecosystems. There's going to be the consequential species, and there's going to be the pivotal species. And of course, one of those will be Utah Raptor.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the thing is you mentioned it before. There's so many possibilities for what can be in there. And because of the fact of Primitive War 2 and how it ended, like you could do as many species as you want in a sense here now because of the way it did. And that's kind of a spoiler. But yeah, man, like, I don't know. Is it bad? Like, one day I'm gonna write like a little short story for Primitive War. Like I'm gonna do a little fan story for you, and I'll send it to you. And I want to get your opinion on it because I really want to do like a little tie-in sort of thing like that. Be like, hey, here's this perspective of something. But one day, if you get a random message from me, be like, hey, here was this. Can you read this, please? This it's a little short story.
I know that's part of why I began this when I was a lot younger. When I was, maybe like 10, 11, 12, I started going on to Jurassic Park Legacy, which was this forum for talking about Jurassic Park.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah.
And I took part in this, text-based RPG game called Live the Legend, where you would play as a dinosaur and you just, write a paragraph. Somebody else would write a paragraph, take turns writing basically one ongoing story. And something that always bothered me about Jurassic Park was, there's only 2 novels. There's no spin-off books. There's no expanded lore that was penned by Michael Crichton. It's all just like whatever Universal paid for to be made when the movies came out.
Yeah.
And with Live the Legend, it was like, you have 2 settings that you can play on Isla Nublar, and I feel like I'm botching that pronunciation. Isla Nublar.
There you go.
And Isla Sorna. And that was it. It was just you have 2 islands and nowhere else to go. And
sadly.
I hadn't seen anything in fiction that allowed for the world that I described. where you could have any species of animal from any time in the past appearing in any location. And so, what I always set out to do with this series was to create a fictional universe where such a story could be told. I mean, with the events that happened in Primitive War 2, I've tried to make it set up so that for the rest of time, so long as Primitive War exists and people read it, they'll be able to make their own stories set
Mm.
within that world. You know, whether it be Dunkley Osteus appearing in Alaska, or
Hmm.
uh, uh, Tarbosaurus appearing in the Gobi Desert,
Oh
or
God.
uh, Velociraptor showing up in the backyard of somebody with a white picket fence. That was always the intention for Primitive War. And, you know, it's kind of funny with having published Primitive War 2 after working on it for so long. And I came up with the idea for Primitive War 2 all the way back in 2013 and always had this plot point planned for it.
Mm.
And with Fallen Kingdom coming out, I was like, well, I already made my decision. I'm not going to change it now. But the difference between having the possibility of any species anywhere fictionally versus a few dinosaurs that get to escape from an auction, there's kind of a big fictional gap there.
Oh yeah, the
In terms of
possibilities that you
possibility.
can do. Oh yeah, there's so much you can do. Like shit, I'm in Arizona right now, and it's like cool. I could really do the possibility of having a Dilophosaurus story, like an actual size Dilophosaurus. Like and kind of bring that to like, oh, that actually isn't a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, that
Hmm.
was part of why I made Primitive War this way, was so that I could give the next generation of dinosaur fans, you know, readers and writers and artists, uh, the means, basically an established playground for them to work with.
Hmm.
And I'm grateful for the fans that have become members of the creative team in designing new species and everything else in concept artwork. But what I think I enjoy the most is just seeing the concept artwork that comes from fans, the new animal designs that fans come up with and their own interpretations, especially when they haven't seen the artwork yet, and you know they
Yeah.
don't even follow the series on social media. Because I will like go onto Google and look up Primitive War and just see what kind of stuff pops up, and I've seen uh, artwork come up in like DeviantArt and ArtStation by fans that don't use Facebook and don't use
Hmm.
Instagram, and they haven't seen Primitive War art, but they're like, I really like this book and I want to draw what I think Cyclops looks like. And I get all kinds of different interpretations of these animals that uh, just go to show how broad and wide the imaginatory spectrum is.
I love it, dude. I really love it. Like I think it's going to continue for a long time. That's the beauty of it all. Is Primitive War can last for a long time. Like even when you finish 3, I don't know if you know what's going on after that, but
Oh yeah, somebody
oh,
messaged me earlier today saying
really?
that yeah, wish I could just pull up this message right now. His name's Howie, but he said that uh he wished me luck because he said I would probably get torn apart by fans after the third novel comes out, and I would lose all of my book's followers. You know,
Really?
because because he thinks that they always want something more, and that's something that I talk about with Babasu. Like fans, people that get invested into these fictional worlds, they always want more. They want more, more, more. That
Mm.
escapism. They want to be able to break away from this reality into imaginary ones.
Mm.
And that hunger is almost never satisfied. I mean, shoot, it was never satisfied for me for Jurassic Park, and so I had to write my own dinosaur books.
It's valid.
Uh, so, in regards to that, I've mentioned this before there's a sequel trilogy planned for Primitive War. Working
Oh,
title is Primitive Warlord or Primitive Warrior, Primitive Warpath, Primitive World, all kinds of different titles, but Primitive is still going to be the headline. But yeah, there's the original Primitive War trilogy, and there's going to be a Primitive War sequel trilogy. But in between those two trilogies, I'm probably going to at least write one or two horror novels just for
ooh,
myself.
I like it. I like it. I'm hoping though by the time we get to the end of 3 that you have your movie or TV deal by then. I'm really crossing fame. I work in film, dude, and they say, oh, pitch your own stuff. I'm like, yeah, but I'd rather pitch Ethan's thing because that will get made real fast. Like, I'm crossing fingers on it. I really am. I mean, who knows? Maybe somebody will make a Primitive War video game or it's in development. You have no idea, and it's a whole fan game.
Hell, I mean, I'm open to everything. I always try to welcome collaborations and new projects because I'm just a guy that writes. That's it.
Yeah.
All I do is I just sit at a computer and type, and that's about it. Uh, I don't have the ability or means to create these illustrations or to make video games or movies or anything else,
Mm.
which is why I always try to uh, express how open I am to that collaboration.
I like
So
it, man. Yeah.
anything that anybody has to pitch of Primitive War or pitch to me of Primitive War, I'm always just a message away.
I like it. I like it. Well, folks, you heard it there. I do want to say, man, Ethan, I know we're a little bit over an hour. I'm looking at the time, like, oh my god. But I do want to. We'll end it here because I don't want, like I said, I don't want to take too much of your time today because I'm probably taking a guess you have some plans. So I want to say thank you, man, for coming on the show. It's been fun. It's fun and nice to actually kind of talk to you because usually we've been messing each other for God knows how long now. But it's nice to kind of be able to sit down and have a talk with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll send you a picture of my sensei, that hawk that's watching me still.
Please do. He's just watching. He's like, you know what? I heard you writing about some Utah Raptors. Little do you know that was my cousin. Like, oh shit.
Yeah, I know. That's why I call him sensei. He's the boss.
Oh my god! If you name a raptor sensei, I'm gonna know about that. I'm like, why is that familiar? Oh, it's a damn hawk.
Well, Primitive War 3, we got Serapis. Serapis.
Ooh, I like it. I like it. Alrighty, man. Where can people follow you on social media and jazz like that, just so people can give a follow?
So on social media, I pretty much keep my private personal life completely detached from my own personal work. So Primitive War is on Instagram, it's on Facebook, it's on Discord, it's got its own website, it's got its own YouTube channel. If anybody's interested in following Primitive War, it's probably easiest to just look up the Primitive War on Instagram, and then in the bio there's a link tree link that will have everything else listed on it, or you can just go to theprimitivewar.com.
Okay.
Yeah, and of course, first novel's out on Audible right now.
Yeah, and shit. I mean, you got Amazon. You can buy Primitive War 1, Dispatches, Primitive War 2. Yeah, and folks, if you were listening to this the whole time and you've not read the books yet or listened, go do yourself a favor. I mean, we kind of spoiled a little bit, but go do yourself a favor and go read or listen. It's well worth the time. It really is. But yeah, man. Thanks, Ethan. Man. Any final words for people out there?
Yeah. Much love and many blessings. And
Love it.
if I was able to turn an idea from when I was, in middle school into what Primitive War is now, anybody can do it. So I think everybody
Awesome.
should pursue what their heart tells them to create, so long as it's not, like harmful.
Yeah, make sure that you're not harmful to others, though, in whatever you're
Yeah,
pursuing.
yeah. Make books, not bombs.
Yeah, there's a T-shirt. Make books,
Yeah.
not bombs, and it's a Utah Raptor being bombed. There's, yeah, that's valid. Thanks, man. All right, Ethan, but I'll talk to you later, man. Okay.
All right.
All
Good
right,
talking to you.
peace. Good talking to you too, man.